I'm going to tell you the story of how I got a $500,000 judgment from my client. So if you have a case and you want to know how to get a $500,000 judgment in your case or want some tips, stay tuned. Hi, I'm Michael Coker, a personal injury lawyer in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And this is going to be the story of how I got a $500,000 judgment for my clients. But first, let me tell you a little bit about what happened. This was a case where the individual came to me who was a painter. He painted houses for a living. And as part of his job, one of the things he had to do was rent equipment to help him reach up on high areas where he needed to paint. And so basically what he did is he reached out to a local company and said, hey, I'd like to rent what's called a boom lift. This is a lift that ultimately you kind of get on. It has the controls and it would raise you up so that you're able to ultimately paint an area that maybe you can't reach by a ladder or other means. The idea being is that these boom lifts are safer than ladders. Often they have much less injuries or fall rates because you're in an enclosed kind of cherry picker container that raises you up so you can safely paint an area and move with a joystick to different areas of the home. So this individual had reached out to this company and had rented one of these boom lifts. And so he rented it, he showed up, he attached it to his vehicle, and he drove it to the job site. Well, when he initially got to the job site, he took the boom lift, he backed his truck up, he lowered the legs as was instructed, and then ultimately raised the boom lift. Now, this boom lift was what's called a self-leveling boom lift, which means that what it would do is it would raise and lower the legs based on the uneven terrain to make sure that everything was level. And as part of that self-leveling, there was a handbrake that was engaged. And so anytime you needed to move the boom lift from, say, one location to another, you would put down the self-leveling legs, but you would also engage the handbrake. And so my client was painting, he painted part of the house, and he was ready to move the lift to a different part of the house so he could reach another side. And so what he did is he engaged that handbrake to make sure that it did not roll away, and he proceeded to lift those self-leveling legs. But unfortunately, the handbrake was completely non-functional, meaning it had been broken and the owner had known that it was broken. And so ultimately, this entire heavy boom lift started rolling towards my client, rolled over the top of him, and ultimately crushed one of his legs. Now, despite multiple lawyers refusing to take the case, thinking the case was too difficult, my firm ultimately took the case and took on this client. And what we did is through our efforts, we ended up going to court and we secured a $500,000 judgment against the owner of the rental company for failing to notify our client of the dangers that was presented by this inoperable handbrake on this boom lift. You see, in Georgia, there's an obligation that when you rent construction equipment, that there's a requirement that that be safe and deemed safe for its intended purposes. And so when this particular owner of the boom lift knew or should have known that this particular brake was either non-functioning or not functioning well, that created a serious danger to anyone that was renting that equipment. And so through our efforts of investigating the case, working it up, speaking with the client, and ultimately telling the client's story to a judge in court, we were able to secure a $500,000 judgment for him for the injuries that he sustained for his crushed leg. Now, money will never fix the injury, right? We can't unfortunately take the client back and make him not have a leg problem anymore, make sure his leg was never crushed in the first place. But through a skilled lawyer who understands these construction rental defect cases, you too can have a case where you could receive a judgment or a settlement from someone if they failed to disclose a defect. Now, these cases kind of fall into a certain world that's kind of divided into two types of law. The first type of law is general negligence, meaning what would a person, a reasonable person, do in that circumstance? So we argued to the judge that a reasonable person in our client's situation would have realized the handbrake was broken and would have made repairs before it was re-rented to another individual. And so a reasonable person needs to protect other people, especially if you're in a business transactional relationship with someone else. You have an obligation to make sure that your customers are protected from any sort of real danger. So first it was a general negligence action, but also there was aspects of what's called product liability. And product liability is when a product is so unsafe that it should have never been given or purchased or rented in the first place. And so we argued that this defective handbrake, obviously, it was foreseeable that if somebody needed to use that handbrake and it was on any sort of even small incline, that boom lift would begin rolling and would not stop. And so because this danger was foreseeable, they had an obligation as the owner of the rental company to ensure that that was fixed and it was safe for ultimately their customers to use. And so by utilizing those two aspects, both the negligence action as well as the product's liability case, doing those two things ultimately led to a successful result. And we were able to, again, the third element of the case was to prove damages. And so damages is basically where you show the court what injuries you sustained and what amount of money is equal to the damage that you incurred. And again, as I stated before, nothing's going to make my client's leg be perfect again. Nothing's going to take away what he experienced. But in the United States, this is the justice system we have, is that we have to assign a numerical value to the injury. And so through our efforts of medical records and medical explanations, we were able to, through the client, through those records, through other aspects, to show the court why our client was entitled to a $500,000 judgment. And so that's an interesting case where we have a $500,000 judgment that was obtained for basically a construction worker or a painter who basically suffered an injury because of someone else's negligence. Now, construction injuries are some of the most serious and most difficult cases to do because you have workers' compensation elements, you have all kinds of aspects of construction law that really is too complicated for a normal layperson who's not a lawyer to handle. And so if you have questions about a construction case, or maybe if someone you know or love suffered a catastrophic injury on the job at a construction site, I would encourage you, whether you call me, you call another lawyer, reach out and talk to somebody ASAP. Because these cases have limited windows of when you can bring a claim. And if you wait too long, maybe you're waiting for the person to feel better or recover. But the reality is if you wait too long, the amount of evidence, the amount of photographs, even the inspection of the thing that caused the injury could go away. And so while I understand wanting to take care of the person you love and make sure they're okay, the other thing that I would definitely encourage you to do is go ahead and pick up the phone and call us, call a lawyer, call somebody who knows what they're doing so that they can go ahead and preserve that evidence and make sure your loved one is protected. And so if we can help you, obviously feel free to call us. I'm more than happy to discuss a case free of charge, free consultation. You don't have to sign with us. Obviously, we want to make sure you feel comfortable with us in a law firm. But if you have a construction case that happened in Georgia, we want to be the person that you call. So give us a call. We're more than happy to talk to you about it. So basically, if you like getting these updates, kind of learning more about Georgia law, interesting cases, changes of things in the legal world, obviously like and subscribe to us. We always put these out just for education purposes so people understand and know what's going on around them. But until next time, everybody out there, stay safe and thanks for watching.